Your gospel reading this morning comes from the gospel according to Luke chapter 6, verses 27 to 38, just following what we read last week. But I say to you that listen, love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who abuse you. If anyone strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also. And from anyone who takes away your coat, do not withhold even your shirt. Give to everyone who begs from you, and if anyone takes away your goods, don't ask for them again. Do to others as you would have them do to you. If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners love those who love them. If you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners do the same. If you lend to those from whom you hope to receive, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners to receive as much again. But if you love your enemies, do good and lend, expecting nothing in return, your reward will be great. And you will be children of the Most High, for He is kind to the ungrateful and the wicked. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. Do not judge, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will be put into your lap. For the measure you give will be the measure you get back. This is the word of the Lord. This is an intense teaching. This is a complicated teaching. It is right in the middle of the red letters, in the midst of Jesus' main sermon, the Sermon on the Mount. It's Jesus' central ethical teaching to us, the place where he gives his kind of instruction on what it means to live the Jesus-y way. And so, because of that, there are so many layers to this onion. You know what I mean? Have you all seen Shrek? Right? Onions have layers like ogres. And as you peel back, there's more and more. There is a plain reading to this text. There's a direct, literal reading, and we should attend to it. You know, I spoke last week about biblical literalism and really what a gift it is in some ways to the church. It's not where I finally want to land, but if we could just approach the Bible and believe what it says literally, man, how radical would that be? And how great a departure would that be from so many Christians for whom phrases like this wash over them without hitting, without making contact. Lines like, give to everyone who begs from you. And if someone strikes you on the cheek, turn to them the other also. One of the questions that I love asking, I used to ask it a lot around college students, particularly those who were kind of background radiation Christian, right? You know what I mean? They're Christian in name only, and they would talk about, oh yeah, I believe Jesus and he died on the cross, whatever. It's not that important. And I'd say, okay, but what if Jesus really meant those things he said? How would that change things? Oh, I went to my parents' church, it was boring. They just prayed for things, nothing ever happened. Okay, but what if Jesus was serious? How would that change things? And I think if Jesus is serious here, the literal meaning here is that if someone does something bad to you, you let them. I don't want you to miss that. If someone wants to take advantage of you, you let them. If someone would attack you, you love them. If someone is going to kill you, you die. There should be resistance to that. Like I'm expecting resistance, but that is the radical nature of what Jesus is saying here. Jesus had people who tried to kill him. Do you know what he did? He let them. He died. He submitted to the cross. And that is his application of his moral teaching right here. And so we would be doing a disservice to the text. I hesitate to peel the onion further if I do not let that incredible, radical, extreme teaching hit you. But I mean, let me say right now that is a large part of what Jesus is saying. It's not all that Jesus is saying, but that is a large part of it. And that Jesus' original audience gathered around him, as well as Luke's original audience, picking up this text for the first time in the first century, that's what a lot of them would have heard. In any crowd of people, some people are more swift than others, and some people are picking up things at different levels, and that's an authentic to the first century true teaching. There is no Christianity if we morally contradict the crucifixion. We cannot have Christianity if we think somehow that the crucifixion was like a dumb idea. That strategically, Jesus, but they're the aggressor, and so that means that you get to retaliate, and then that's morally neutral. No, it doesn't work. We need that crucifixion. It's essential. And so, if people do bad stuff to you, rather than doing bad stuff yourself, you move on. You don't allow the bad stuff people do to you to take away your moral integrity. You retain that moral integrity. That's the advantage. Because no matter what you do in your life, some bad stuff is going to happen. Tragedy is going to befall you. The lions and the wolves are out there, and sometimes they're going to get you. But if you return bad for good, then you'll be a good person. You'll be like God, because that's what God does. When the people reject him and insult him and don't listen to him, God loves. So if you return bad for good and good for good, you'll be like God. If you return bad for bad and good for good, you'll be like everyone else. But there is another layer. Because it turns out in the world that God created, God's way of doing things isn't just a total strategic blowout. It actually turns out God's way of doing things, Jesus' teaching on how to act, works in some unexpected and unimagined ways. I want to show you what I mean, but I need a volunteer. I wonder if I can get someone, preferably a woman. Would anybody? I need someone to slap me. Sam's ready. Sam and Don. We get like the two strongest guys in the room. All right, come on, Sam. Come on up, man. It's all right. It's all right. Now, there's a parallel passage to this. Go ahead, stand up here. There's a parallel passage to this in the book of Matthew, and it specifies the right cheek. And now, if you're in the ancient Near East, you're only going to use your left hand, for toilet paper. All right, so you can just put that behind your back. All right, you've got your right hand, and it says, if somebody strikes you on the right cheek, all right, can you hit me on the right cheek here? Go ahead, do it, man. Oh, come on. All right, but notice that. All right, so he's kind of got to go.
Get around.
He's got to go at a little bit of a. Yeah, in fact, usually the way you're probably going to do it is backhand, right? I mean, that's the good way to kind of get. Yeah, but I understand you don't want to hurt your knuckles. Now, what if I do this?
Oh, that's easy.
Then what do you got?
That's easy. That's easy.
So look at what Jesus is teaching. You did a great job. Thank you. You can sit down. Look at what he's teaching. A backhand slap is a typical way that you would abuse and humiliate someone you consider less than you. It is a typical way in the ancient Near East and today that you would reprimand a slave, that you would beat a wife, that you would attack someone to cause pain, but more than to cause pain, to cause embarrassment, and to put yourself at a place of higher status. And so there are a number of possible responses to that, right? I think the possible response that our culture most encourages is the hit back response, right? That's one option. Hit back and harder would be another response. A second response, right, more in line with the plain reading of Scripture is just to take it, right? Just to keep getting hit, to cower away. But Jesus actually isn't saying just take it. He gives a third option, to turn the other cheek. So imagine a slave. Imagine a slave who gets hit, right? Who then does this and says, why don't you hit me with your open hand or with your fist? If you're going to abuse me, I understand, I'm stuck here, but then abuse me. Do you want to commit a felony right now? Do you want to commit assault? You think you're just slapping me? Are you attacking me? Is that what you want to do? It turns the decision making on the abuser. It highlights the wrong that's being done when someone strikes you on the cheek and says, why don't you do that so everybody can see? Why don't you do that in a way, I will put myself in more danger if that's what it takes to show you that what you're doing is wrong. You wouldn't be allowed to hit someone that way in the ancient Near East. Hit someone with an open hand, hit someone, particularly not an equal. So Jesus is teaching, he's teaching probably to a crowd of the least, the last, and the lost, right? He's teaching them to say to their equals who think they're better, why don't you treat me like an equal? I demand dignity. And then the abuser has to decide, either am I going to do it, right? Am I going to become that monster, and am I going to be seen as that monster? Am I going to use my left hand and admit that this action I'm doing is unclean, or am now I going to shrink away? Am I going to back off? Am I going to cede the power and the dignity to this person following Jesus' creative advice? The Reverend, and I emphasize Reverend Martin Luther King, was a master at this. He read this passage and he understood it in its original context, and that is a large part of why he did what he did. He was from up in New York, and he did demonstrations up there around the college where he taught. And people would host sit-ins, and they would refuse to move from diners where they said, no coloreds allowed, and they would get dragged off by police and arrested. But Martin Luther King was smart. He said, no, this isn't going to work. This isn't going to work. It's not, we've got the new color TV cameras, we need blood on the cameras. So he moved his protests to Alabama on purpose. He went to the eye of the storm. He went to the center of where the most violent racism in America at that time was taking place. And he started marching. And the reason he was marching is so that the authorities would try to stop him from marching. Do you understand? It was civil disobedience. The reason he was marching is so that the racist hillbillies in their pickup trucks would come and attack the marchers. And then the television cameras would see something different. They would see black men and women and peaceful demonstrators alongside black men and women getting hit and turning the other cheek. They would see them getting beaten and not hitting back. And that we who watched this would be convicted. And we would realize that what we were doing was wrong. Martin Luther King was taking Jesus seriously. He believed that Jesus really meant what he said. And that's how Lyndon B. Johnson, I don't think it's politically controversial to say Lyndon B. Johnson did not have a heart of gold. Right? Lyndon B. Johnson was not like a stuffed puppy dog of a human being, but his heart was moved. And the Civil Rights Act was passed because of this. I'm not Martin Luther King, but I've also benefited from Jesus' ethical teaching here. I've actually never been in a fight in my life, which is saying something because y'all have heard me talk. I'm a giant nerd. And how did I never get beat up? But it turns out that most of the time, if not all of the time, fights are about to start. It starts with you want to go? You want to go? And I would just always be like, no, are you kidding me? Of course not. You would defeat me easily. That's not what this is about, no. There was a particular time I was in college, and I had a friend who was a resident assistant. So her job was to make sure all the rules were followed in the dormitory area. It was a Christian campus, but it was a college campus. So the largest rule that would not be followed is underage drinking. So I come home from, a night out with friends once, and she's just about to go on rounds, and she's a little worried about it because it's dark and there's, a lot of people partying on campus, and I decided to go with her. And I'm like, yeah, I'll just do your rounds with her. And indeed, it's not long until there's a particularly rowdy group of students who, are not hiding well the fact that they are drinking on campus where it's not allowed. And so she goes in, and I wait outside, but she leaves the door open so that I can kind of keep an eye on things. All these people are physically bigger than her, and she's, counting the bottles and doing this kinds of thing and moving it aside to write them up. And then, she finishes, they get the write-up, and they move on. And just as she's moving on, big guy comes up behind me. Big guy who'd been in the room. He was ROTC, so he was a little bit older. He was probably the guy who, or I'm sorry, not ROTC, GI Bill, right? So coming back to college after a tour, he just, he did a kind of imposing move, right, where he hovered over me, and he said, "Hey, you was sitting there, you was disrespecting my boys. I don't stand for that. I'm a Marine, I kill Hajis. And I don't tolerate disrespect. If I ever see you doing anything like that again, you're through. I can make it look like an accident." And I paused for a minute, composed myself, and I decided to just look him right in the eye. And I said, well, again, not being big, not, kind of a look up eye contact. I said, well, I want you to know that wasn't my intent. I was following a college girl around in the dark because it's my desire to respect women, not to disrespect you. I don't know you. I don't know anything about you. All I know is that she was uncomfortable to enter that room, and I could help make her a little more comfortable. It's not my desire to disrespect anything about you or your service. And I doubt it will happen again. But if I had to make the same decision over again, and if I have to make the same decision over again, I will. Because given a choice between disrespecting you or disrespecting her, I'm going to prefer to respect women. I'm going to prefer to respect the weak and the less. And so I hope it doesn't come to that. And then he paused. Then he had a moment. He's like, thank you? I've never had someone, okay. Yeah, as long as there's no more problems. He walked away. It's amazing how people respond when you refuse to make yourself a victim, when you refuse to make yourself a martyr, and when you say, if you're going to make a bad decision, that's your decision to make. There's a second part of this teaching. Jesus talks about if someone demands of you your coat. This is a common thing that Roman soldiers could do. So, does anybody want my coat? Alex, I think you'd look good. Is Alex in the back? Yeah. Alex is wearing blue. So people probably only owned two things. They would own a shirt and they would own a cloak. And so, Jesus says that if someone makes you give up your coat, then what you should do is just not even withhold your shirt. Are any of you uncomfortable yet? Are you worried? I've got a shirt under it. But, people in the ancient Near East wouldn't. And feel this discomfort. Feel the discomfort that you're feeling right now and imagine it magnified. Right? Imagine that to the 100th degree if I'm standing naked before you because you're abusing me. Right? And you've got to look at it. And when people ask what happens, it's your fault. That's what this, you can go ahead and keep that to the end, Alex. Good job. Thank you very much, Alex. That's what this teaching is instructing. Perhaps a modern retelling, since people probably only owned one article of clothing. And it's not like they had more of the same article in their closet, right? This is one of the most valuable things they had. It'd be the equivalent of somebody robbing you and saying, give me your wallet. And then you saying, oh, well, okay, but just, there's a problem though. Yeah, you can have my wallet, but listen, there's not much cash in there. Do you have a pen and paper? I need to give you some PIN numbers. If you want to, can I take you to the ATM? We can get a lot more out. I don't want to be dishonest about if you're trying to rob me here. Really, most of my money is in debit anyway. Can you imagine how a robber would respond to that if that situation arose? I can actually. Pauline Jacoby did it. Pauline Jacoby is a 92-year-old woman. And she, just like Martin Luther King, was inspired by Jesus' teaching. She was shopping at a Walmart in Memphis, Tennessee, and a young man got into her car, got into the passenger side, and said, give me all your money. And she was inspired to make this decision. Boldly, she said, "No." And he said, "No, seriously, I have a gun. Give me all your money." And she said, "I'm not going to give you my money." And he said, "What? You have to. You don't. I'll kill you." And she said, "Well, I'll tell you what. If you do kill me, I'll go to heaven and you'll go to hell." And she said, "Why don't you sit down? I want to read you something." And she took out her Bible. And she began to witness to that man in that car. And he said to her, "You know, I think I'll pray about it tonight. I think I need to rethink the direction my life is heading." You know what Pauline said? I love this. She said, "Yeah, you could pray about it tonight. You know, you could pray about it right here, right now. Jesus hears you wherever you are." And he did. He prayed with her, and he accepted Christ that day. And then she willingly gave him all the money she had. $10. She said, "You can't take this from me, but I'm going to give it to you. Because if you are desperate for money, if you're behaving this way, I'm going to give it to you." But I like that part she said at the beginning too, that if you do kill me. So often when we have abusers, when we have oppressive forces in our lives, that's the form it takes. It takes the form of a threat. And you know, this teaching isn't about you give people whatever they're asking for, right? What Jesus is teaching here with these creative solutions to oppressive problems isn't you always say yes, but it's that you do the thing that they think you can't do. So usually you get these ultimatums. Either you do this immoral thing or you're fired, right? Or unless you do Y thing that you're uncomfortable with, I'm leaving you. What many of the saints and martyrs have learned to do is to take the bad option. You know, there's one I'm thinking of that was a soldier in Soviet Russia that was a Christian. And the commandant said, "Oh yeah, you can be a Christian, but that's going to mean that you're going to have watch duty all night, the Siberian winter, and by the way, you'll be in summer fatigues." And so he said, "Okay." And he did that. He stood at attention this whole time. That kind of response says, "All right, I recognize that you have a certain amount of power over me. But if my choice is bow down to false gods or the fiery furnace, I'll take the furnace." And often that fiery furnace has a unique way of working out for the people who take it. When somebody gives you an ultimatum, what would it look like to say, "I'm so sorry that you've decided that's on the table. I guess you'll have to make your decision. It's not my decision, it's your decision, if you want to take action that way." Not allowing injustice to take place in the darkness, bringing the injustice out into the sunlight, thinking of creative ways to solve the problem beyond the two options. Sometimes this passage is used, this passage, Luke 6, Matthew 5, it's used wrongly to justify abusive relationships, right? My husband's beating me. Well, turn the other cheek. That's not what this passage means. This passage means let that black eye see the light of day. Walk around, go to church or the police station with that black eye. Don't give in to his game. Demand to be treated as an equal. Find a creative way to bring that injustice into the light. I know that the black eye doesn't apply in every abuse situation, but think of a way to address that abuse with kenosis, with self-emptying, with humility, with self-sacrifice. There's a third example that's given. It's not in the Luke passage, but it's in the Matthew passage. You're familiar with it. It says, if somebody presses you into service for 1 mile, go with them instead 2 miles. And that's become like a default saying in our culture. Go the extra mile. Huzzah! Be a hard worker. Go the extra mile. But here's the thing. In Rome, you were legally allowed to, as a soldier, it's kind of not unlike during the American Revolution, you know how soldiers could quarter people's homes? The British soldiers were allowed to just walk into someone's home and be like, you have to let us sleep here because we're the soldiers. It was like that. Rome said you're legally allowed to make any peasant carry your stuff if you're tired, but only up to 1 mile. And so if somebody says, all right, I'm tired, you, peasant, carry my stuff for 1 mile. Jesus says, just keep walking. When your mile's up, you just keep going. Because here's the funny thing. Then you have their stuff. And they're chasing after you saying, no, wait, stop. If my centurion sees this. It's kind of like that old saying, before you criticize someone, walk 1 mile in their shoes. Because then when you criticize them, you're 1 mile away and you've got their shoes. Give to everyone that begs from you. There's something to be said for being a hard worker. You know, the end of this passage says you have a tendency to reap what you sow, judgment for judgment, forgiveness for forgiveness. There's something truly to be said for going the other mile in the popular sense. But there's also something amazing to be said for being creative and being diligent and being available in the Christian sense. One of the pastors in this area I really admire, his name's Brian. He has developed something of a reputation around town for helping and loving the poor. And so occasionally poor people will come to his house, just in the middle of the day, interrupt him when it's family time, and they'll say, hey, I heard you were a pastor. I heard pastors have to give me things if I beg. So can I, have some food? Brian has developed just an amazingly Jesus-y response. And he starts saying, give you food? Do you think this is a soup kitchen? Do you think I'm like giving handouts here? This is a house. This is my family's house. And dinner's at 6. Come sit at the table with us. Be part of the family. He has 6 kids. Sit down with my 6 kids, and we'll share a meal. You see how different that is? Do you see how that addresses the same problem? I don't care what your story is. I don't care what what your pitch is to try to get more out of me. You can get everything I have. It's available. It's a part of the kingdom of God, but come and be and engage and treat me this way. So now I want to return, having looked at these examples, having looked at this creativity, and hopefully having challenged you to think about ways in your own life when you encounter problems, you might think about a third way. There's the first way to solve a problem, right, which is to attack it. Go after it head on. Some problems can be attacked that way. That's often you make the problem worse. There's a second way to attack a problem, right, which is to ignore it, pretend it doesn't exist, let it keep happening. Often there's that third way. Write a song about it. Create good art. Think about it in a way other people aren't thinking about so that the injustice that is going on gets recognized for what it is. whatever's wrong with it, whatever the reason is that it's a problem. So I want to return to the plain reading. Because again, I don't want to lose it. I want you to notice that all of these creative solutions have something in common. Self-sacrifice and love is a part of all of them. Willingness to not get mine so that you can get yours, right? Willingness to give up mine for the sake of what's good. And I want to return us to Jesus on the cross. I want you to notice something about that radical demonstration of this ethical teaching, the ultimate turning of the other cheek on the cross. I want you to notice that by doing that, Jesus won. Jesus won over the high priests who had him arrested. He was victorious over the Roman Empire that put him to death. Jesus defeated Satan on that day and triumphed over death itself, and death did not have the final word. For Jesus rose again, and so shall we all on the last day. There is truth to the need to sacrifice. There is truth to the need to give up. But when that happens, it has a funny way of leading to victory. I hope this moral teaching can lead you to your own victories in your own lives as we worship the God who is the greatest, who is the smartest moral teacher there has ever been, and singing together. All of us were born enemies of God, sinful, fallen, and broken beyond compare, but I have good news. God is a God who loves his enemies and teaches us to do likewise. And Jesus didn't just die on the cross to prove a point. He did it because he loves you. Pray that you feel that love as we go into our fellowship meal.